Stop for a moment. Not physically, mentally. Stop reacting. Stop agreeing. Stop disagreeing. Just listen. You believe you are conscious. You believe you are aware. You believe that your thoughts belong to you. But consciousness is not what you think it is. It is not the source of your decisions. It is not the place where choices are made. It is not the control center of your life. Consciousness is something else. It is the story your brain tells you after everything important has already happened. Pause. Right now, as you are listening, your brain is doing thousands of things you are completely unaware of. Your heart adjusts its rhythm. Your eyes make tiny movements. Your muscles prepare for actions you may never take. You do not choose any of this, your brain does. And only later a quiet voice appears in your head and says, "This is what I decided." But that voice is late, always late. The decision was already made. This is why control feels real, but often disappears the moment something unexpected happens. Because control is not constant. It is conditional. Your brain allows you to feel in control only when the environment feels safe, familiar, predictable. The moment uncertainty appears, the brain takes over completely, and it does it silently. You don't feel the switch. You don't hear the command. You only feel the result. A sudden reaction, a strange emotion, an impulse you cannot explain. And when you try to explain it, your brain gives you a reason. Not the real one, a reasonable one. This is the illusion of consciousness. The mind is not a leader. It is a narrator. It does not decide what happens. It explains what already happened in a way that makes sense. This is why two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different truths. Because truth is not what happened. Truth is what the brain decided was safe to believe. Your brain does not care about objective reality. It cares about survival, about efficiency, about conserving energy. Thinking is expensive. Awareness is slow. So the brain automates most of life. Habits, reactions, judgments, preferences. You do not wake up and choose who you are today. Your brain does, based on yesterday, based on patterns, based on past outcomes. This is why change feels so difficult, not because you are weak, but because your brain sees change as a potential threat. The familiar may be painful, but it is predictable, and predictability feels safe. So the brain defends the familiar even when it hurts you, even when it lies to you, even when it keeps you stuck. This is why people repeat the same mistakes while fully understanding them. Understanding is not control. Awareness is not power, at least not at first. The brain allows awareness only when it does not interfere with its primary goal: survival, efficiency, stability. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are experiencing the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. The problem is not that the brain lies. The problem is that it lies convincingly. So convincingly that you call the lie your personality, your beliefs, your identity. And the moment someone questions it, the brain reacts defensively. Not because the idea is wrong, but because the illusion feels threatened. This is the first truth most people never realize. You are not as conscious as you think. And that realization is not meant to scare you. It is meant to slow you down. Because the moment you see the narrator, you are no longer completely inside the story. Did your eyes choose for you, or your brain? Your brain is fast. Not in the way people usually mean. Not logical. Not clever. Fast in a more dangerous way. It reacts before you arrive, before thought forms, before words appear, before you even realize that something is happening. Speed is the reason you feel certain before you feel informed. The brain does not wait for permission from consciousness. It never did. Long before humans had language, the brain learned one simple rule: react first, explain later. That rule never changed. What changed was the story we tell ourselves. You believe that thinking comes first, that emotion follows, that action comes last. But the real order is different. Reaction, emotion, explanation. By the time a thought reaches awareness, the body has already responded. Heart rate adjusted, breathing changed, muscles prepared. These changes happen in silence. You do not feel the beginning. You feel the echo. This is why you sometimes feel uneasy without knowing why. The brain noticed something you did not. A tone, a movement, a pattern from the past. Your conscious mind is not equipped to process millions of signals at once. The brain is, so it filters. Not for truth, for relevance. Not for accuracy, for speed. This is why first impressions are so powerful and so misleading. The brain decides within a fraction of a second whether something is familiar, safe, dangerous, or worth attention. And once that decision is made, the mind begins its work. It looks for reasons, evidence, justifications, not to discover the truth, but to defend the initial reaction. This is confirmation bias. But more importantly, it is self-protection. The brain does not like to admit that it reacted blindly. So it builds a narrative, a convincing one. This narrative feels like logic. It feels thoughtful. It feels intentional. But it is built on a foundation that was never conscious. This is why arguments rarely change minds. You are not arguing with logic. You are arguing with a decision that happened before logic was invited. Speed is also the reason why fear spreads faster than facts. Why anger feels immediate. Why calm takes effort. Fear is fast. Anger is fast. Understanding is slow. The brain prioritizes speed because in the past, slowness meant death. Modern life has not updated that system. So now the same mechanism that once protected you can also mislead you. You react to emails as if they were threats. You react to opinions as if they were attacks. You react to uncertainty as if it were danger. And the brain encourages it. Because reaction is familiar, control is slow, awareness is slow, and slow feels unsafe. This is why silence makes many people uncomfortable. Because in silence, the brain loses speed. And when the brain slows down, the narrator becomes quieter. This is the moment most people avoid. Because without constant reaction, you begin to notice how little you actually control. The brain does not want you to notice this, so it distracts. With thoughts, with worries, with memories, with imagined futures. Speed keeps the illusion alive. But when speed slows, something else appears. Space. And in that space, for the first time, a choice becomes possible. Not control, not dominance, just a pause. And sometimes, a pause is enough to change everything. Your eyes are not tools for seeing. That is only their surface function. In reality, your eyes are sensors connected directly to the oldest parts of the brain. They do not analyze. They do not reason. They do not doubt. They detect. Movement, contrast, symmetry, irregularity. Long before a thought appears, your eyes have already sent a signal, and the brain has already reacted. This is why you sometimes feel drawn to someone without knowing anything about them, and why you feel uneasy around others without a single clear reason. Your eyes notice something your mind cannot translate into words. A micro-movement, a delay, a tension. The conscious mind sees faces. The brain sees patterns. Pupils expand and contract without permission. They respond to light, but also to emotion, fear, interest, attraction, discomfort. You cannot control this. You can fake a smile. You can control your words. You can rehearse your behavior, but your eyes remain honest. Not because they want to tell the truth, but because they do not know how to lie. This is why eye contact feels powerful. Direct eye contact activates deep survival mechanisms. It signals attention, potential threat, potential connection. Too little eye contact feels evasive. Too much feels aggressive. The balance is processed without conscious calculation. You do not measure it. Your brain does. And when that balance feels wrong, you feel it in your body first. A tightening in the chest, a slight discomfort, a subtle urge to look away. You may ignore it, but your brain does not. This is why people often say, "I had a bad feeling, but I ignored it." The feeling was real. The explanation came later. Eyes also reveal lies, not in the dramatic way movies show, not through exaggerated movements, but through inconsistency. The brain expects certain patterns. When words say one thing and microsignals say another, the brain notices the mismatch, and that mismatch creates tension. You may not consciously identify the lie, but you will feel that something is off. This is not intuition. It is pattern recognition, built through millions of interactions. Your eyes feed data. Your brain compares it to memory and reacts, all in silence. This is why people who manipulate others often control their gaze carefully. They know that eyes betray intention. They know that confidence is not only spoken, it is shown. Through stillness, through timing, through controlled attention. But even the best manipulators cannot fully control their eyes, because stress always leaks, and stress changes rhythm. Blink rate increases, focus shifts, micro delays appear. The brain reads these signals even when you do not. This is also why screens feel different from real interaction. Your eyes evolved to read depth, movement, and presence. Digital images flatten reality. They remove subtle cues. So the brain fills the gaps with assumptions, with projections, with imagination. This is why people misinterpret texts, why online arguments escalate quickly, why empathy is harder through a screen. The eyes are missing information, and the brain guesses, often incorrectly. Understanding this changes how you see others and how you see yourself. You realize that many of your judgments were never conscious. They were visual reactions followed by explanations. This does not make you shallow. It makes you human. But awareness of this mechanism creates distance, a pause between seeing and believing, between reacting and assuming. And that pause is where perception begins to shift. Not because the eyes change, but because you finally notice how much power they always had. Your brain does not experience reality. It reconstructs it. What you call perception is not a direct recording of the world. It is a prediction, constantly corrected by incoming signals. The brain guesses first. Reality corrects later. Most of the time, the guess is good enough, so you never notice. But sometimes the correction never comes, and the guess becomes truth. This is how illusions work. Not because your eyes are weak, but because your brain is efficient. It would rather be approximately right than precisely uncertain. Missing information creates discomfort. The brain does not tolerate discomfort well, so it fills the gaps with memories, with expectations, with familiar patterns, not with facts. This is why memory is unreliable, not because it fades, but because it changes. Every time you remember something, you do not retrieve a recording, you rebuild it. And every rebuild adds small distortions. Emotions leak in. Later knowledge alters details. Other people's stories mix with your own. Over time, confidence grows while accuracy disappears. This is why people can be absolutely certain about events that never happened the way they remember. The brain prefers a complete story over an accurate one, a smooth narrative over a fragmented truth. This is also why optical illusions are powerful. You see lines that are not equal as different lengths. You see motion where nothing moves. The eyes send data. The brain interprets. And interpretation is influenced by context, expectation, past experience. This is not a flaw. It is a shortcut. A shortcut that once saved lives. In the past, hesitation was dangerous. Seeing something quickly was more important than seeing it perfectly. So the brain learned to assume, to generalize, to complete unfinished patterns. In the modern world, this mechanism creates problems. You assume intentions without asking. You assume meaning without checking. You assume outcomes based on incomplete information. And because the brain presents these assumptions with confidence, you mistake them for knowledge. This is how misunderstandings grow. This is how conflicts start. This is how certainty becomes rigid. The brain does not say, "This is a guess." It says, "This is how it is." And the narrator agrees. This is also why silence is uncomfortable. Silence leaves gaps, and gaps invite uncertainty. So the brain fills them with thoughts, worries, imagined conversations, predicted outcomes. Most of anxiety is the brain filling gaps that do not need to be filled. The future is uncertain. The brain hates uncertainty, so it simulates, over and over. Not to find the truth, but to feel prepared. Prepared for something that may never happen. Understanding this does not stop the brain, but it reveals the mechanism. You begin to see thoughts not as facts, but as constructions, temporary models, useful sometimes, dangerous when believed blindly. When you realize that perception is a prediction, you stop treating every thought as a command. You create distance, and in that distance, something changes. You become less reactive, less certain, but more accurate. The brain will always fill the gaps, but you no longer have to believe everything it builds. Overthinking does not mean you think too much. It means the brain feels unsafe. The looping mind is not intelligence. It is a warning system stuck in motion. When the brain senses uncertainty, it searches for resolution. But when resolution is unavailable, the search becomes repetition. The same thoughts, the same scenarios, the same imagined outcomes. Again, and again, and again. This feels productive. It feels like preparation, but it is not. It is simulation without action. The brain is trying to predict the future so it can relax. But the future refuses to be predictable. So the brain tightens its grip. Thoughts speed up. Attention narrows. The body remains alert. This is anxiety, not fear of something specific, fear of the unknown. The brain prefers a bad certainty over an open question. That is why people often worry about things that hurt them instead of accepting uncertainty. Pain is familiar. Uncertainty is not. The looping mind keeps revisiting the past, Because the past feels concrete. It replays conversations, rewrites moments, imagines different endings, as if repetition could change reality. But repetition only strengthens the loop. Every time the thought returns, the brain marks it as important, and important thoughts return faster. This is how habits of thinking form, not because they are true, but because they are repeated. The brain does not ask, "Is this thought helpful?" It asks, "Have we seen this before?" Familiar equals relevant, even if it hurts, even if it exhausts you, even if it slowly erodes clarity. This is why telling yourself, "Stop thinking," never works. The brain does not stop on command. It stops when it feels safe. Safety is not silence. Safety is resolution. But resolution does not always mean answers. Sometimes it means acceptance. Acceptance that not everything needs to be solved right now. The brain resists this idea because control feels safer than trust. But control is an illusion. The more you try to control every thought, the stronger the loop becomes. The loop survives on attention. It feeds on resistance. This is why awareness matters, not force. When you notice the loop without trying to stop it, something shifts. You step out of the content and into observation. You see thoughts as processes, not commands. The brain continues to produce them, but they lose authority. Over time, the loop weakens. Not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. Anxiety is not a flaw. It is the brain trying too hard to protect you. But protection without perspective becomes prison. Understanding this does not eliminate anxiety, but it changes your relationship to it. You stop seeing it as an enemy and start seeing it as a signal that the brain is operating without enough trust. Trust not in outcomes, but in your ability to respond when outcomes arrive. The looping mind calms when it realizes it does not have to predict everything, only to be present, only to respond when the moment comes. That realization takes time, and patience, and silence. Things the modern brain rarely allows itself. The brain is not built for truth. It is built for comfort. Truth is complex, contradictory, often uncomfortable. Comfort is simple, familiar, emotionally efficient. So the brain chooses comfort whenever it can. This is why lies spread faster than facts. Not because people are stupid, but because lies are often easier to digest. They require less effort, less uncertainty, less internal conflict. The brain avoids conflict inside itself. When a new idea challenges an existing belief, the brain experiences stress. Not intellectual stress, physical stress. Heart rate changes, muscle tension appears, defensive emotions rise. This reaction happens before you consciously disagree. By the time you say, "I don't believe that," your brain already decided that the idea is dangerous. Dangerous ideas are rejected, not examined. This is how manipulation works, not by forcing belief, but by aligning with existing emotional patterns. A confident tone feels trustworthy. Repetition feels true. Familiar language feels safe. The brain mistakes certainty for accuracy. It mistakes confidence for competence. This is why charismatic people often influence others regardless of truth. The brain does not analyze intentions. It reads signals, posture, voice, rhythm, timing, and it reacts. Manipulation does not require lies. It requires framing. What you say matters less than how the brain receives it. Fear-based messages spread fast because fear bypasses analysis. Anger spreads fast because it simplifies reality. Us versus them. Right versus wrong. Complexity slows reaction, so the brain avoids it. This is why misinformation thrives. Not because facts are unavailable, but because emotional clarity feels safer than factual uncertainty. The brain prefers a wrong map that feels clear over an accurate map that feels confusing. This is also why people defend beliefs that hurt them. Beliefs are not only ideas, they are emotional anchors. Removing them feels like losing stability, so the brain protects them, even against evidence, even against logic, even against lived experience. Understanding this changes how you see others. You stop assuming ignorance. You see protection. You see fear. You see the brain doing what it always does when stability is threatened. This does not excuse manipulation, but it explains why it works. The brain wants to belong. It wants certainty. It wants meaning. Manipulators offer all three, at a cost. And the brain accepts the deal before the mind reads the contract. Awareness is the only real defense. Not intelligence, not education. Awareness of emotional reactions before conclusions form. When you notice the feeling first, you gain distance from the message. You do not reject it immediately. You do not accept it blindly. You observe. That observation weakens manipulation, because manipulation relies on speed, and awareness slows everything down. Awareness does not change the brain, at least not immediately. The brain will continue to react, to predict, to protect. It will continue to lie when lying feels safer than truth. Awareness does something else. It creates space, a small pause between reaction and belief. That pause is almost invisible, but it changes everything. Without awareness, reaction becomes identity. You say, "This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is how things are." With awareness, reaction becomes information. Something noticed, not something obeyed. The brain still reacts. Fear still appears. Judgment still forms. But you no longer disappear inside it. You witness it. And witnessing is the beginning of choice, not control. Control is an illusion. Choice is real. Choice does not mean you can decide your feelings. It means you can decide what you do with them. The brain wants speed. Choice requires stillness. Stillness feels dangerous to a system built for survival. So the brain resists it. This is why awareness feels uncomfortable at first. It removes the familiar noise. And in that silence, many people feel exposed. But silence is not emptiness. It is clarity without commentary. The brain fills silence with thoughts because it fears irrelevance. But when you remain present, the noise slowly loses urgency. Not because it stops, but because you stop obeying it. This is how quiet control develops. Not through dominance, not through force, but through understanding. You begin to see patterns without immediately reacting to them. You notice emotional surges without acting on them. You observe thoughts without believing them. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Most people live inside reactions they never chose. They defend opinions they never examined. They repeat patterns they never noticed forming. Awareness interrupts this cycle, not dramatically, quietly, subtly, almost invisibly. And that is why it is powerful. The brain respects consistency. When it sees that reactions do not always lead to action, it adapts. It slows down. It recalibrates. Not because it understands philosophy, but because patterns changed. The brain learns through experience, and awareness is a new experience. Over time, what once felt automatic begins to feel optional. Not everything, but enough. Enough to change direction. Enough to respond differently. Enough to see through some of the lies without fighting them. The goal is not to silence the brain. That is impossible. The goal is to hear it without becoming it. To let it speak without letting it rule. Most people never discover this. They live convinced that every thought is truth. Every emotion is a command. Every reaction is destiny. But it is not. It is just the brain doing what it always does. You do not need to defeat it. You only need to understand it. And understanding is the quietest form of freedom. If you are still listening, then something in you already noticed the pause. That is enough.